The NFL does not have an official minor league system, and it doesn't need one because some schools act as a pipeline for certain positions, sending countless players to the pros. Institutions like U.S.C., Notre Dame, Ohio State, and the rest of the Blue Bloods reliably put out readily assembled machines that eat, sleep, and breathe football. Today, we're going to break down Notre Dame's white tight end cloning machine, the terrible quarterback assembly line, and which Southern school is Kicker U. College football's greatest factories is coming up right now, actually. For the purpose of this list, a football factory is defined by volume of pros created rather than quality. We're going through the offensive and defensive positions plus kicker to find out which school has produced the most draft picks at each position since the modern era began in 1967. Let's get into it. U.S.C. shows up a lot on this list because, in fact, they've actually put out the second most overall NFL players to Notre Dame, who will also have a presence in this video. Despite the pure volume, U.S.C. hasn't produced a single Hall of Famer at the most important position in football, but they have sent 19 draft picks at quarterback to the league, the most of any school in the nation. They've built such stellar pros as Todd Marinovich, Cody Kessler, and the human butt fumble. Hard to believe that despite all of the volume, Carson Palmer is the best QB to ever leave Southern Cal. By quite a bit, actually. He was an all-pro in his best days and may have been destined for a gold jacket had his knees not been turned into dust. The Trojans also have a pick in the making in young Kedem Slovis, what is a clownvis, who becomes draft eligible in 2022. Stanford is close to U.S.C., producing 16 picks, but they got boxed out by John David Booty. Those U.S.C. quarterbacks do have a weird thing for the booty. The Cornhuskers gave the NFL Amon Green and Roger Craig, and somehow the highest picked running back was Lawrence Phillips, 0-time Pro Bowler and 1-time killer. Tied for first, U.S.C. said we'll one-up you with 2-time slicer halfback O.J. Simpson. Both schools have produced 41 draft picks at running back. While Craig might be deserving, Nebraska doesn't have a Hall of Fame tailback to their credit. Southern Cal sent Simpson, Marcus Allen, and Frank Gifford to the Hall. Wisconsin also shows up in the top 5, and you can probably attribute that to the fact that they've also produced a metric ton of offensive linemen. I'm kind of shocked Alabama wasn't in the top, but remember this list is about quantity, not quality. Surprisingly, Arizona State actually cracked the top 10. Who could forget recent stars like Kalen Ballage, Eno Benjamin, and Marion Grice? Or the great Oscar Dragon, picked in the 17th round of the 1972 draft by the San Diego Chargers. Dragon flamed out, as you might have guessed. Michael Irvin, Reggie Wayne, and Andre Johnson. Irvin is probably loud enough for all three of them. They're just 3 of the 43 wide receivers the Hurricanes have had drafted. Their best year was 1988 when Irvin, Brian Blades, and Brett Perryman were all drafted within the first 2 rounds. They also had 2 first-rounders at wide receiver picked in 2001, Wayne and the criminally underrated Santana Moss. Johnson and Wayne, quiet as they were 2 of the most productive receivers of their era, despite being overshadowed by huge personalities like Chad Johnson, Steve Smith, and T.O. As Cortland Finnegan found out, Andre Johnson smoked softly but carried a big stick. While they've had the most storied history at the position, it's a good thing they moved on from Tate Martell at quarterback, or they maybe never would have sent another wide receiver to the league. 24 Notre Dame tight ends have gotten picked in the draft, and somehow all of them are white. Kyle Rudolph, Tyler Eifert, Durham Smith, and John Carlson. All guys that could catch a 50-50 ball in the end zone and then sit down and properly explain how a whole life insurance policy works. The most iconic of this bunch might be former Giant Mark Bavaro, who dragged the entire 49ers roster on his back in 1986. Even Ronnie Lott, who might have been able to pull him down if he had 10 fingers. They also put out Dave Casper of Ghost to the Post fame, one of the few games the Raiders won without cheating in the 70s. Oddly, the highest pick of them was Tony Hunter, who was selected 13th overall by the Bills in 1983. Hunter only lasted 4 years in the NFL before hanging him up. Penn State ranked number 2 with the second most tight ends. No, I will not make a joke here. A subsidiary of Irish Trucking, the Irish take the cake here again with 66 total offensive linemen selected in the draft. The average weight of an offensive lineman across that period is roughly 285 pounds, so Notre Dame has produced 9.4 tons of offensive linemen. And one of the most recent picks may have been the best of them all. Quentin Nelson went number 6 overall to the Colts in 2018 and has made first-team All-Pro in both of his first 2 seasons. Some other recent hits include Ronnie Staley and Zach Martin. Bob Kuechenberg was a standout Irish pick back in the 70s. The Cooch guarded Bob Greasy's blind side and apparently managed to play well into his 60s, as pictured here. Other schools that put out the big fellas include U.S.C, Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, and Oklahoma. It's not too much of a surprise that the corn-fed units from the Midwest end up being the best bodyguards in the NFL. The NFL, NBA Finals, and college ball all at once? Am I dreaming? We've gone from zero to sports. And let's celebrate! Winning season has returned at MyBookie. Join now with promo code POINTS100 and get your first deposit match, dollar for dollar, all the way up to $1,000. I didn't say that wrong. From money lines to spreads, game totals, and winners, just like the array of sports happening right now, it's all here. Plus, it's not too late to get in on the Super Contest, where for only $10 you can win big, like $100K and prizes big. Every play you want to make is at MyBookie. Make your picks, win big. Collect that Skrilla. Winning season begins today at MyBookie. A bit of a shocker here, but the Hurricanes have produced more draft picks on the defensive side of the trenches than LSU, Alabama, U.S.C, or Florida. How about some big names and bigger boys like Vince Wilfork, former Patriot Space Eater, or a couple Hall of Famers like Warren Sapp and Cortez Kennedy? The earliest selection was Russell Maryland, who went number 1 overall to the Cowboys back in 1991. Maryland was a solid player, definitely not a weak spot on a defense that won 3 championships, but only made 1 Pro Bowl as a first overall pick. Of course, the most famous Miami defensive lineman of all time went undrafted. Hell, he never even played in the NFL and he got cut from a practice squad in the Canadian Football League. Can you smell what I'm cooking? Penn State has always been linebacker U, but they put out just one more linebacker in their history than the Trojans, but strangely has only put out 1 pro player at the position in the last 5 years. That doesn't take away from a storied history that includes former 2nd overall pick LeVar Arrington and 4-time Super Bowl champion Matt Millen, who was a 0-time champion as a general manager or purveyor of smart draft picks in Detroit, however. Joe Paterno sure knew how to recruit and coach up linebackers. He could get them to cover, something he was an expert at doing himself. Damn it, I promised I wouldn't make a joke. Ohio State knows defensive backs, and they proved it in the 2020 draft by producing a top 3 pick, Jeff Okudah, as well as another first-rounder, Damon Arnett. You could argue that the Raiders artificially inflated their number of first-rounders and Arnett should have been a second-rounder, but that's kind of the Raiders' thing. You wouldn't tell John Elway not to draft a tall white quarterback, would you? The Buckeyes put out the 3rd overall pick in 1997, Sean Springs, as well as Raiders safety Jack Tatum, who went 19th overall in 1971. Ohio's most dominant year for defensive backs in the draft was 2017, when Marshawn Lattimore, Malik Hooker, and Garyon Conley were all picked in the top 25. Lattimore went on to win Defensive Rookie of the Year that season. And the one you've been waiting for. Which factory produces the most kickers? The Vols have somehow made 8 kickers look good enough to get picked up by an NFL team. Maybe their uprights are wider than regulation because you've never heard of these guys. Instead, I want to talk about the real kicking factory. Obviously, if you produce a kicker that gets picked in the 1st round, you've earned the distinction of Kicker U. Congrats, Florida State. Again, thanks to the Raiders for reaching on a 1st-round pick and making Sebastian Janikowski the 17th player selected in 2017. Your GM would be fired on the spot and forced to walk home in the rain if he tried to pull that today. No kicker is worth a 1st-round pick. Maybe Justin Tucker, but they rarely get picked at all for a reason. Seabass had a hell of a leg and loved to party, but was only a Pro Bowler once in his career. If you're spending the 17th overall pick on a kicker, he better be able to hit 70-yarders with ease. Of course, one of the more recent busts at kicker was also a Florida State Seminole. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers picked Roberto Aguayo late in the second round, the first kicker picked that high since Mike Nugent in 2005. Aguayo was automatic as a Seminole, but finished his rookie season with the worst field goal percentage of any kicker in the league and was cast out of the big show after just 2 years. That's the thing about Football Factory. Sometimes the finished product comes out with more defects than you're willing to accept. Some schools obviously send more kids to the league, but quantity should take a backseat to quality. Sure, U.S.C. has developed the most NFL quarterbacks, but not quarterbacks that you want leading your football team. Or you want your running back to come from Alabama, where inside their factory, they feed their RBs defensive backs souls. And Josh Norman found that out the hard way. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do not forget to like, comment, or subscribe. I'm 5 Points Vids, and you made it to my next video.